Hi, Gracefields. Last year we began our series in Revelation, looking at the 7 letters to the 7 churches. Revelation chapters 1 to 3. And in Revelation 2 to 3, the church is depicted as God's lampstand, the visible witness of God's presence on earth. Yet there were 3 things which we saw in the letters that will try to extinguish the witness of God's lampstands: complacency, compromise, hostility. Even so, each letter ends with an incredible future hope promise, encouraging all Jesus' churches to overcome and continue being witnesses. Now, as we move into Revelation chapter 4 to 22, the visions, realize that all the subsequent visions in Revelation will speak into these 3 struggles and Jesus' promises, encouraging and warning the church to remain a faithful witness. So I'd encourage you to reread Revelation chapters 1 to 3 as we begin part 2, looking at Revelation chapters 4 to 11. Yet before we begin on our journey in Revelation chapter 4 to 11, keep the following key principles in mind. So number 1, remember the original audience. The book of Revelation was given to 7 historical churches during the 1st century, most likely during Emperor Domitian's reign between 81 to 96 AD. The visions of Revelation chapter 4 to 22 spoke to them in this 1st century prior to speaking to us in the 21st century. So keep the 3 struggles of the 7 churches in mind: complacency, compromise, and hostility. Secondly, Revelation is not linear or chronological. Let me explain. In Revelation chapters 6 to 16, you will notice that John sees 3 cycles of judgments: the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls. Each cycle ends with a vision of the final judgment in similar language, like peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. And in between these cycles, or even during the cycles, there are a series of what we call interludes in chapter 7, chapters 10 to 11, and chapters 12 to 14, that explain the place and role of the church, God's people, during this time. Here's the thing: if you read Revelations chapter 6 to 16 in a linear way, chronologically, then you will actually have 4 final judgments. And we haven't even looked at Revelation chapters 8 to 22, where the final judgment is also depicted in multiple ways. So you either have to then conclude that there are many final judgments, or you need to conclude that this book is not linear. So how should you read Revelation chapters 4 to 22? See it this way. Revelation chapter 4 to 22 is looking at the last days that started with the first coming of Jesus and will end with his return. But it's looking at the last days from different angles, perspectives, viewpoints. It's a 360-degree view of the last days. Each angle, each perspective, each viewpoint giving its own technicolor, multidimensional understanding of the time we live in. Let me illustrate it for you. When people write history, you can write about one event or period, but you can write about that one event or period from different angles, perspectives, or viewpoints. For example, you can look at the Battle of Isandlwana from different viewpoints. You can look at it from the viewpoint of the British settlers, or the British soldiers, or the Zulus fighting the British, or the Zulus fighting for the British, or the missionaries from Rorke's Drift. Each of these viewpoints contributes to coloring in this one event. And so in the same way, Revelation 6 to 16 is giving us different viewpoints, these visions of the same period, the last days. Even so, you will notice as you read the different cycles, an increase in severity between the different cycles. For example, the 7 seals says 1/4 of the earth. The 7 trumpets says 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And the 7 bowls depict total ruin. So what is this indicating to us? Is what Jesus said about the last days. All these, as he said, are but the beginning of the birth pains. Matthew 24 verse 8. As we get closer to the day of the Lord or return of Jesus, the partial judgments of God will increase in severity, like birth pains. Point number 3, there are 4 dominant views of interpreting Revelation chapters 4 to 22. Now, this is probably one of the main reasons why churches often avoid doing a series on the book of Revelation, or Christians ignore reading, studying this book. Because when interpreting Revelation, realize that throughout the history of the church, there are 4 views that have shaped people's understanding of the book. Now, you might know one or be persuaded by one of these, so feel free to discuss a view, but do it in a gracious and loving manner towards one another. As Paul writes, be eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3. Now, you have more detailed notes on each of these views in your group guides, and I'd encourage you to read the introduction. So I will not give you a detailed explanation of each one now, but let me give you a summary of each one and then present you what we hold to as a leadership team at Gracefields. And let me use the beast imagery in Revelation chapter 13 to illustrate the differences. Now, the first view is the Pretus view. In summary, the Pretus interprets Revelation this way, claiming that the book is fulfilled in the 1st century, specifically with the destruction of Jerusalem at 70 AD. Even so, Preterists are not in agreement with one another. Some argue it's fulfilled in the 5th century with the fall of Rome, while more moderate preterists concede that Revelation 19 to 22 is about the future. So this view has had many revisions over the years. And for most preterists, when they look at the beast, they interpret it as Emperor Nero is identified as the beast in Revelation 13. That's the preterist view. You also have the historicist view. And in summary, the historicist interprets Revelation as a roadmap of church history. For example, in this view, Revelation then predicted the invasion of the Vandals and Goths into the Western Roman Empire, the Islamic expansions of the 7th century, the reign of Charlemagne, the Protestant Reformation, and later the rise of Napoleon and even Hitler. And in this view, the identity of the beast has actually had many revisions. For example, Luther thought the beast was the Pope. For the 19th century Christians, they thought it was Napoleon. For the 20th century Christians, it was Hitler or Stalin. It often depends when the historicist lived. The third view is the futurist view. In summary, the futurist interprets Revelation, the book of Revelation, as referring to a specific period in a future time just before the end of history. And this view gained a lot of traction with the rise of dispensationalism in the 19th century. And this view was then popularized by the Left Behind book series in the 90s and has had a film and various film adaptations. And in general, it argues that Revelation refers to a 7-year period prior to the return of Jesus. Even so, not all futurists are on the same page. Many futurists recognize that the book isn't linear, and so they've adapted their interpretation. And so this view has had many revisions as well, depending on where and when a futurist lived and interpreted the book. And for many futurists then, the beast refers to a singular figure who will be a singular antichrist just before the return of Jesus. And many futurists have tried to guess who that might be, from Hitler to even Putin today. But the fourth view is the idealist view. And in summary, the idealist reads Revelation as a symbolic portrayal of a conflict between good and evil, or the forces of God and Satan. And this view does take the biblical symbolism of this book seriously, but it does not root the book in time at all, past, present, or future. But the book, as we see, clearly has a beginning and an end in view with the last days. Moreover, the idealist view sometimes ignores its own rules of biblical symbolism and often tends towards allegory, depending who you read. And so in this view, the beast is not a specific individual or government, but a general lens through which we interpret every worldly kingdom in opposition to Jesus. Now, having given you a very brief summary of each view, here is our understanding, our view, if you like. There's a reason why we have 4 views since Christians began to write about Revelation till today. because each view is actually highlighting something that is true in the book of Revelation. Like all biblical prophecy, Revelation speaks to the past, the original audience, like the Pretus, the present, like the Aorist, and the future that culminates with the ultimate fulfillment, the Futurist. Revelation uses rich biblical symbolism and imagery that functions like signposts, pointing you to various Old Testament and New Testament passages to interpret its meaning, like the Idealist proposes. Now, where we are distinct from the Preterist, Aorist, and Futurist is we don't pin a particular passage to one event within the last days, like the beast just being one person or one government or one moment. Like the Idealist, we understand the beast to speak to all generations within the last days. So any Christian, no matter when they lived, live or will live, can pick up Revelation, here specifically chapters 12 to 13, and apply it to their generation's governments, movements, or false teachers. Now, where we are distinct from the Idealist is Revelation isn't a timeless portrayal of a cycle of good versus evil. It shows a clear movement towards the return of Jesus. The book might look at the last days from different perspectives and angles, but each perspective has a beginning and an end. So it is rooted in history, moving towards the end of Jesus' return. So as an analogy, imagine the images of Revelation that we're going to see as a cloak or mantle passed on from generation to generation to generation. And so the cloak of the two beasts empowered by the dragon in Revelations 2 to 13 fits well on the shoulders of the Roman Empire that persecuted the church and the false teachers of the first century. And the first readers, those first historical churches, would have seen this. Yet that cloak also fits very well on the shoulders of the Islamic conquerors in the 7th century and the Roman establishment of Luther's day and Napoleon's France in the 18th and 19th century. And we believe the cloak is being passed on during these last days, and for us today, the key is to see upon whom does this cloak rest now, knowing that one day there will be a final, ultimate future fulfillment, a last passing on of the cloak, who will fit the image of the two beasts prior to Christ's return. Now, to help you navigate the biblical symbolism and have a better discussion as fellowship groups, you will see in your group guides that each study or passage will have what we call a set of keys. Keys to help you unlock the vision. And here's what you need to do. Read the passage with the keys. During the study, please don't try to look up all the passages in the key section. There are just too many of them, and trust me, there are way more passages than in the group guide. You can always ask your fellowship group leader to give you their commentary notes if you want more. Just work through them as they are presented in the group guide. But do what the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17:11. They received the word with all eagerness, notice, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. You have the passages, so go look them up before or after your time together as a fellowship group to see if these things were so. But it is our prayer that as we journey together through Revelation 4 to 11, we at Gracefields will see our world, our time, our identity and mission through the lens of Revelation, and so live as Jesus' witnesses during the last days. Like the 7 churches, may these visions encourage, warn, and inspire you to overcome the same challenges the church faced in the first century: complacency, compromise, hostility. Our high priest, Jesus Christ, the Lion and the Lamb, is among us and within us by his sevenfold Spirit. We are his temple. We are sent to be his prophetic voice in this world. And so may his words to Antipas be true of us as well. You did not deny my faith, my faithful witness.